Out of the 93 major icebreakers in the world, only 13 have traveled to the North Pole. Hello everybody, I am Nick the Naval Architect. Sure, breaking the ice is easy enough, but to reach the most hostile and remote regions of our planet, it takes more than just a strong hull. We need ships that were specifically adapted for these remote regions, a polar class ship. And this comes with a few extra surprises. Let's find out. But just a quick disclaimer first. Icebreakers are very much a specialty within the field of ship design. I have some general knowledge with them. I've worked with designs of ice-class cargo ships, and I have worked on an Antarctic cruise ship, but there are still many people out there that know a lot more than me. So if you end up talking to one of these specialists in icebreakers, listen to them. They know more. Old ice. The average person is going to rate the strength of ice based on just its thickness. We assume that one chunk of the ice is pretty much the same strength as another chunk of ice. But with the polar regions, you also need to consider the age of the ice. You see, in the majority of the world, ice is a transient thing. It forms each winter and then completely melts by summer. But in the polar regions, ice can last multiple years. This multi-year ice, it gets stronger with each year. Your conventional sea ice is made from seawater, and that salt in the water, it weakens the ice. But if that ice lasts multiple years, the cycle of partially melting and then refreezing, it flushes the salt out of the ice. So now we're getting solid, freshwater ice, a giant chunk of ice. Much stronger and much harder for an icebreaker. Traveling to polar regions, you need to consider the thickness and the age of the ice. That extra ice demands extra power. We need to supersize everything. We need a larger ship to break through thicker and stronger ice. And it needs more space for extra facilities. This all adds to the power requirement. And boy, do we need a lot of power. So let me lay a few comparisons on you. The Mackinaw WAGB 83, that was a 1944 icebreaker that served on Lake Michigan. This is not polar class. This is a standard run-of-the-mill, but pretty large icebreaker. That only required 7.5 megawatts, or 10,000 horsepower. And with that amount of power, they could continuously break through 0.75 meters of ice. Okay, 0.75 meters, that's decently thick. The Healy is a polar class icebreaker. It can continuously break 1.4 meters of ice. That's super thick. 1.4 meters, that's coming up to about neck height on me. To do that, it needs 34.5 megawatts. That's over 4 times more power. But we're not done yet. The Healy isn't the largest polar icebreaker out there, not by a long shot. Russia created an entire fleet of nuclear-powered icebreakers. I love Russia for this, of taking something as massive as nuclear power and using it for icebreaking. The Project 22220 class of icebreakers, they come with 2 nuclear reactors, producing a total of 350 megawatts. Unbelievable! Except only 60 megawatts of that actually gets delivered into the propulsion shafts. But working with those twin nuclear reactors, you get plenty of power to spare. And all of this power goes into more than just propulsion. We also need it for heating. With polar temperatures that drop down to minus 60 Celsius, heating is not a trivial thing. This requires major effort. We even have to go beyond heating just the vessel interior. Remember, these ships are made out of steel, which is very good at conducting heat, or in this case, conducting the lack of heat. People might simply rest their hand on a steel handrail and within a few seconds get stuck. Your hand instantly freezes to the steel. So to prevent this, we run heated steam throughout the handrails. We run heated steam under the decks, around any exterior machinery. When you're considering what needs external heating, ask yourself, do I ever want this device to move again? And that also applies to people. Do I ever want this person to move again? If so, then we probably need to heat it on a polar class icebreaker. And that exterior heating also ties into ship safety. If you imagine a storm with this icebreaker, you're going to have waves breaking over the bow, spraying the deck, and quickly freezing. Remember, this is water in freezing temperatures. Any water quickly turns to ice. This builds up, forming thick layers of ice that are attached to the sides of the hull. And if you think about that across the entire surface of the ship, ice is actually pretty heavy. Across the entire surface of the ship, only a few centimeters of ice can add over 100 metric tons of extra weight. Well, our ship can only support so much weight before it sinks or capsizes. And that's the real problem, because frequently this will build up on just one side, heeling the ship over. Left unchecked, the ice buildup might capsize the vessel within a few hours. So we need an option to quickly break up that ice and shove it off of the deck. Hence the heated exterior. It's much harder for ice to build up against metal that's constantly trying to melt it. Thinking about this heating problem, nuclear icebreakers make a lot of sense. Going back to that Russian icebreaker, only a small portion of the heat that the reactors generated, only a little bit of that actually went into propulsion. The steam cycle that drives this propulsion, it's not a very efficient thermodynamic cycle. It results in megawatts of leftover heat that we need to remove after we've used it to drive our propellers. Well, the easiest option is to just dump that extra steam straight into the ocean. Don't worry, this steam is free from radiation. It never even enters the reactor. But before we do all that and go to all that complexity, if we already have this steam, there's no need to be stingy with it. Pipe it throughout the vessel. Use it everywhere! Steam turns into unlimited fresh water, heated swimming pools, a steam sauna, steam nozzles to clear away the deck. I bet you that the crew enjoy endless hot showers on those nuclear icebreakers. Speaking of endless supply, my kittens, they're worried about their kibble. You see, they think that I need subscribers for their kibble, and right now, only 15% of the viewers are subscribed to this channel. Friends, my kittens say that that isn't nearly enough for endless kibble. They're very worried. So please don't break their hearts. Subscribe. Do it for the kittens. Back to icebreakers. And let's give merit to one of the biggest challenges for polar operations, the remote location. You're on your own. You are far away from anything. You're beyond normal radio communications. You're beyond the operating range of most regular Coast Guards. You're traveling into waters that search and rescue can't enter. They don't have ships strong enough to go there. As a polar class icebreaker, you're already the biggest, baddest ship in the region. If you get in trouble, we can't find anyone better equipped. You're it. So a polar vessel needs facilities for self-rescue. This includes extended machine shops. They can build any component on the ship. They have storage rooms packed with spare components, stocked full of just bars of steel and ready to be shaped into anything they need. Most polar class icebreakers, they include a full set of spare propeller blades so that you could replace an entire propeller. And those blades are pretty heavy, so we include cranes to move them around and lower them over the side, plus divers trained to replace the blades in freezing cold water. If I look long enough on these ships, I could even find a spare piston head somewhere in the storage closet. When trouble calls, the polar class icebreaker does not call the tow company. They do their own rescuing. They also operate much more independently. They don't have nearly as much communication operating in these polar regions. Your typical ship, they're going to check their position from GPS satellites every few minutes. They're going to receive daily updates on weather predictions for the region. All of those features become a lot less reliable in polar waters. GPS and satellite communications, they almost go out the window because you have much fewer satellites orbiting near our poles. There's no more daily weather updates. You want to predict the weather? Look out the window. Hence, many polar icebreakers include helicopters for support. This gives them the ability to fly around and scout out the best ice routes. And simple traditional navigation is also encountering problems. Most ships come with backups for GPS. They can rely on their magnetic compass or their gyro compasses to detect their direction. But that's not so easy in a polar region. Magnetic compasses, they depend on their alignment with the Earth's magnetic field. Well, near the North and South poles, that magnetic field isn't so reliable. It gets a little iffy. And the gyro compass? Well, that uses a rotating gyroscope to always align with the Earth's rotation axis. Except at the poles, you land right on top of the axis rotation. Your angle to that axis changes quite a bit, because remember, the Earth is a globe. That makes it a lot harder to determine your direction. Now, clearly, we have found methods to compensate, but it just shows that at the polar regions, the simplest things become unexpectedly challenging. It's all complicated. One major complication? Getting stuck. Yeah, it's possible. The ice, it constantly shifts and moves. It's closing the channel behind you even as you cut it. In the frigid heart of winter, the ice might start refreezing behind you, gaining thickness over days until the icebreaker can't crack it. So you suddenly find that you can't go forward due to a thick patch of ice, and the channel has frozen shut behind you. You can't go back. What do? Well, first, you make sure that the ice doesn't crush you. The figure on your screen shows a cross-section for the Mackinaw, which is an icebreaker that operated here on the Great Lakes. Now, notice there are no vertical surfaces on that hull. Every section has a slope and a curve to it. If the ice were to push in from the side, that force is actually going to get redirected, pushing upwards on the hull. This is how icebreakers are able to ride up on top of the ice. Now, I'm not talking about the hull completely popping out. It's unlikely that there would be enough force for it to completely push the icebreaker out of the water. But this shape acts like a safety valve. It limits the maximum pressure on the hull. If it starts pushing too hard, the hull rises up and makes some more space. Now that we know we're going to survive, it turns into a waiting game. In the worst case scenario, there's nothing to do but hold position until the spring, when the ice will thin out a little bit. Waiting and crew morale are a serious concern. Polar-class icebreakers, they deploy with a huge fuel and food reserves. They are literally ready to stay there all year long. In the case of a nuclear icebreaker, they can go years without refueling. Depending on how far they are from clear water, the icebreakers could also use those helicopters. They can evacuate non-essential personnel to a rescue ship that's waiting outside of the ice field. And of course, I talked about crew morale. They will have entertainment on board. They need to stay sane during the endless days of waiting. If the worst happens and a polar icebreaker gets stuck in the ice, it doesn't just survive, it thrives. The polar regions of our planet, they're not pleasant. They demand uncompromising strength, vast reserves of energy, and the flexibility to adapt with all of these challenges. Polar-class icebreakers have to go beyond anything that we would expect from a normal ship. These miracles of modern endurance, they share more kinship with a spacecraft than a cargo ship. They are voyagers, traveling into vast, desolate regions, meeting the harshest fury that our planet can dish out, and returning the crew home safe. That is what makes them so special. They can go where no one else can. Thanks very much. I am Nick the Naval Architect, and if you want to support this channel, tell a friend about it. Share the good news. Thanks. Not bad for a side hustle, huh? Yes, this YouTube channel is actually the side work The main effort that I work on is with DataWave Marine Solutions, a marine consulting firm. We convert your business goals into engineering solutions, maximizing the profit and return from your biggest asset, your ship. So check out the website and find out more about us. Let's see how we can help you. Thanks.